It's so perfect for today because we are deep in our study of Everything Belongs by Richard Rohr, the gift of contemplative prayer. Now, has anyone asked themselves yet in this series why the subtitle says the gift of contemplative prayer, but we don't seem to have talked about prayer a lot? Do we? Have we been talking like prayer? Not so much. What's that old school unity song about our thoughts? Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Listen to what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a place of peacefulness, and know that God is always there, and every thought becomes a prayer. This book certainly deals with prayer, doesn't it? Because we are immersed in looking at our thoughts. We are immersed in looking at our belief system, looking at our minds, looking at what is happening in this factory called me and this experience called us and this realm called religion and this thing called the world. So we're looking at the prayer of the heart. We're looking at the prayer of society. We're looking at the prayer of the world because we're looking at the thoughts. And do you think our prayer could just go up a couple notches? Like, really think about it like that. Everything that we're discussing here, these are our prayers. We give them expression, we give them life, and we form this experience of life based on them, both individual and collective. So this week with Richard Rohr, we're studying what is known through, I think, all religions have some sort of concept of this, and it's phrased in so many different ways, but the concept of what he calls, I think he calls it a little self and the big self, or the smaller self and the divine self, or the person and the Christ. There's so many cultures, so many religions, so many ways to experience this. But it's that idea that we have kind of the perception of two things, me and God, or Jesus, the Christ. But in actuality, we are all one. Actuality, there is only one. So it's that dance of uncovering the big self and the little self. And what does that look like? What does that look like for you, for me? What does that look like in different religions, in different realms? What does that look like in unity? He discusses what it looks like in Catholicism, in Buddhism. And I think without this conversation and a spiritually mature conversation, I think that for sure religion, if not spirituality, can kind of miss the mark. Because we can just be talking about something. If we leave God out there and so far out there, we're just talking about a thing that's far away. Until we integrate that thing into a personal experience, until we begin to lift the veil and we begin to recognize that I could not be separate from this thing that I call God, and I don't care what anyone else calls it. You can call it love, call it whatever you want. But I cannot be separate from that any more than I can be separate from my breath, any more than I can be separate from the animating faculty that is bringing this body right here into motion. So what does that mean? I love that we have a baby in the house. I don't know where that baby is, but that baby can do whatever it wants to do the whole time. And at the end of the service, if I could say hi to that baby, I would be really happy. That is life, the animating faculty. It's a miracle, you guys, right? Like, that baby is a miracle. That baby came here. That baby pressed the animating faculty of God to each of us right here and right now, from the other side of the veil that we can't see. What will we greet it with? what will we greet it with? Love. Why? Because God is love. And every ounce of love in you, every ounce of love in me, every ounce of love that we can feel, God is even that and greater, right? Because it all came from God, Godness. Sometimes the word God just even cuts it short, doesn't it? Like you can't really talk about it. The second you try to talk about it, you confine it, you box it in. 3 letters does not contain that essence, that animating faculty, that wisdom. Small mind, big mind. In the East, in the West, the balance. Richard Rohr talks about the small mind and the big mind as also being the rational mind and the mystical mind. The rational mind, the mind that I think I have, that I think is me, that I think I'm a separate sentient being, that I have needs and wants, that those could conflict with you, that I have ideas and thoughts that they could be right or wrong, that I have experiences that are somehow separate from yours, that I have feelings, and then the mystical mind. The mind that has moments of knowing that we are one, that we are of love. Moments where the veil lifts, moments where we may recognize that life does not begin with birth and does not end with death, but that life is eternal, that maybe just like a dolphin can hear things I can't hear. Maybe my sweet dad, who lifted off into his freedom form, can see things I cannot see. You know what I did in the room when I held his hands? We have this beautiful picture with all of us holding his hands. Sorry, Linda, if you're watching, I love you and we're all sending you love. Pop this into the sermon, and my stepmama might be here with us. But intense, very intense. But we're all there with him and we're holding his hands. And it's like, I know enough now to know that when someone is supposedly unconscious and supposedly not there and their brain is supposedly not working, that it's good to talk to them, and they very well might be watching. And even if you're a skeptic, and even if you'd love to believe that, but you just can't find it in yourself, can it hurt? Imagine being able to see your loved ones. And imagine being able to know right there that they're kind of like looking up, looking around, talking to you like, we get it, that you might still be just as real and just as you were a second ago. And we see that. We're in pain, but we see that. Right? Imagine that parting gift as you lift out of your body into wherever we are all going. This is the mystical mind. It's those moments of recognition that I don't know everything, that I have a very physical experience. Like, if it's in front of me, I think it's real. If it's not in front of me, I think it's gone. Well, think about if we had an antenna in this room and if we had scientists in this room that could pick up all the radio waves, every single wave, every wave of light. You know, we'd be so overwhelmed if we had the capacity to tune into all of that. We'd be listening to every TV channel. We'd be hooked up to every Wi-Fi network. All of our cell phones would be going bonkers in our brains. We just don't have the perceiving capacity to comprehend and to experience it, right? But it's no less here. You get those scientists, you get those devices in here. Everyone put their thing on ringers on. Boom. Do you know how many ringers are going off right now? How many texts are coming through? How many emails are arriving? God, we have a small mind, a rational mind, an ego self, a carnal mind that can't perceive all of it in every instant. I think we'd be going crazy. And thank God we have a mystical mind. Thank God we know about the teaching of a higher power. Call it a higher power, call it source, call it the animating faculty. Call it nothing at all. Just experience it in the silence. Charles Fillmore talked about the idea of carnal mind, like our human self. And when he would talk about us as humans and ego and that, he'd kind of diss us a little bit, you know. Like, I think if he was here now, he would be a little more holistic about it, you know. He had some things that he was not fond of. We won't go into that. That's a whole other sermon. You can tell by his language. Charles Fillmore is Unity's co-founder, but you can tell by his language that we could make the human self wrong. What if we could make the small mind and the big mind perfect just as they are? And perfectly imperfect, right? Like, rather than seeing one as an enemy, like the ego or the carnal mind or like my animal nature, you know, like the part of me that does stuff I wish it wouldn't do, or, you know, feels ways I wish it wouldn't feel. What if we could recognize that it is all a perfect pattern in the mind of God of what we are here to be and emanate as? And we could begin to actualize the teachings. I'm sorry, but y'all have to just turn around for a second and look at that baby. Oh my heavens. That baby is the sermon. Like, you don't even need to talk. Right? Because this is it. Like, can we really feel that? The moment of birth and the sacredness of life. The moment of what we call death and the sacredness of life. Why go through the trauma we put ourselves through so often and calling any of it and all of it wrong? Why not dance through those times, dance through those struggles, dance through those things, and fall into the arms of the Almighty in whatever experience you have of the Almighty, whether it's music, whether it's love, whether it's others, whether it's a spiritual practice, whether it's Jesus, whether it's the Buddha. Fall into love and let it hold you, let it hold us, let it carry us through so that we can walk in a gentle softness in life. So often I'm with friends. I have the most insanely incredible friends. Each one in their own right is like, I don't even know. But I was with one of them processing some things, and she just said to me, you know, if we could just hold on to that, like that moment. I was probably talking about my dad a little bit, but if we could just hold on to that, if we could just hold on to that moment of seeing that beautiful baby being comforted. For those of you that are live streaming, there is a beautiful, tiny little baby. I think dressed as a pumpkin or something. I can't see that far. And the moment someone lifts off, the moment you realize that life as we know it, the physical is temporary. If we could hold on to that, how differently would we live in each moment, right? So then what is the spiritual practice? What is all of it? All of it is just a sweet whisper reminding us to come home to that in each present moment. It's that whisper saying, you just looked away for a moment. Psst, psst, come here, come here. Come back. You're home. You're home. Richard Rohr refers to the Buddhists when he says the Buddhists call the small mind the clinging mind. It wants to attach itself to everything. in order to figure out everything, in order to control everything. It doesn't have a high tolerance for mystery or even ambiguity. Small mind is preoccupied with clarity and control. Did you hear that part? It doesn't have a high tolerance for mystery. Can we turn that into an affirmation? I have a high tolerance for mystery. Together, I have a high tolerance for mystery. He says both the rational and the mystical mind are needed for wholeness, at least in this human condition. They are not easy partners. He says, I think it's soul work that will give us the compassion and patience to see there is truth in both East and West. We need the full truth of big mind and the patient truth of small mind. We can't get trapped in either one. He goes on to say, I also believe religion in its institutional form is often the least mature manifestation of the living presence of Christ. I love it that we're in a church, and I'm going to read it again. I also believe that religion in its institutional form is often the least mature manifestation of the living presence of Christ. He says suffering and risen people everywhere tend to show forth God's glory more than managed religion. It's funny, on the Unity Ministers discussion group, it's a private discussion group, thank the heavens. But on this discussion group, there was a comment about, I think I'm allowed to share this. I won't say anything about who said what, but there was a comment about Unity's beginnings and about it being like an institution, a church, or religion versus an educational movement, and someone saying, well, hey, I heard it referred to as this, as a religion, a faith. I think that's what it was. I heard it referred to as a faith, but I thought it was an educational movement. What are your thoughts? And, everyone's piping in on their thoughts. And I think it's both and, right? It's not an either or, it's both and. It started as an educational movement, not to be a religion at all, but to make any spiritual practice more of a practice, more something you can bring to life. And I think that's why we have such diversity and unity. And then just like people organize and people do things and people wanted education, people wanted, when people are leading, people wanted to come together and they wanted to expand and they wanted to then have ministers and they wanted to have spaces. Then they wanted to have it at the same time other people have it. And it became what we know as a new thought and progressive Christian religion. Denomination, kind of. Actually, we're still really not listed as a denomination. We got into the Parliament of World Religions, I think in 2010, under the umbrella of New Thought. But no one knows where it fits. Some people want to throw it in Christianity. Some people want to throw it in New Thought. And every once in a while, someone kicks us into New Age, which there is a big difference. If you don't know that difference, it's a deeper conversation. That would be a good talk sometime, huh? The difference between unity and New Age. Now, that is to say, and this is totally a tangent, there are a lot of unity people that are also New Age. I would say more than in any other things I've ever seen. But there is a difference between the unity. But the idea is how often that mind wants to define things. If you were to tell everyone in this room, like if we were to play one of those games that you play in school or at workshops, and we were to say, get into groups and write up your definition of God, and your definition of like spirituality or the practice, whatever, life, God. Let's just stick with God. That's probably loaded enough. Your definition of God. And then you put it on a sign, like the kids had their little flag, right? So you put yours on your sign. And then everyone stands up and we make sure, we have enough for everyone. Like everyone has to identify with something that's up there, right? And then you all move to corners of the room. So if you refer to God as source whatever, come on over here. If God is Father and Jesus, come on over here. If God is love, period, end of story, there. If it's like undefined and exploring, over here, whatever. If you were to describe your spirituality and God, we wouldn't be together. We wouldn't be together because this one would say to that one, that actually is a trigger for me. This one would say to that one, that is like so not grounded and so airy-fairy that I just I don't even want to be associated with that anymore. And the other ones would say, yeah, I hear that, but I'm just disconnected for it. And the other ones would say, that's sacrilegious. How? You're not even Christian. Well, you're not even New Thought. Well, what is unity? Someone define it then. And so what happens? We start picking and pulling to get the answer. And what are we picking and pulling at? What are we picking and pulling at? There's a little piece of rug coming up. This is so symbolic. I am a cleaner. If I am at your house, this is not a threat, but if anything's not clean, I'll clean it. If the sink in the bathroom, if there's a little thing, I'll clean on my way out. I just clean everything. I was at my Aunt Eileen's, who was in her Freedom Forum with my dad, and I was at the beach house, and she loved it that I would clean, because when I would come, she's like, yay, Erin's here, so she'd go away, and I'd be all excited for her to come back and see how clean it was. And it was this little beach house in Breezy Point, New York, tiny little bungalow. At one time, it didn't even have, the walls didn't go up to the ceiling. You could peek over to see the next bedroom. And so the living room was probably about this size, and it was carpet just like this, and there was this little thing like this just right here. And I was so excited. I was almost done with my cleaning. Marfus isn't here. Just kidding. That's a joke. That's our Unity rep. He's amazing. Reverend Brenda said, don't pull that, if you couldn't hear her. So this one little thing, right? And so I don't know if I didn't see it. I don't even remember what happened, but I started vacuuming. And that little thing got caught in the vacuum. And it just spun around the vacuum thing all across. And it was, you couldn't even see it fast enough. It just went, unraveled it. The whole, it wasn't actually the whole living room, because what happened next was I got on my hands and knees, all in a panic. Because one of my other traumas, from childhood, I guess, is breaking things, right? I'm the person that could break something and would just set it back up, so that the next time, I won't do it anymore. But, so the next time you open the cabinet, all of a sudden the glass just goes, oh! How is that? Oh, that broke. Whoops. I just prop it back up and walk. That's a dark side of mine, but anyway, it goes through. So the next thing was me getting on my hands and knees with this curly hair that went across the whole carpet. You could see it was just the whole carpet, it was the whole living room. And I'm down on my hands and knees with a needle, trying to sew every last piece. And I'm really nervous. I'm trying to get it done before she gets back. And of course, it's really long, and I was not going to get it done. And thank gosh that my aunt is nothing like me. Because she comes in and she's like, wow. And you pretty much have to get new carpet or else deal with that you forever have a big strip missing in your carpet. And she's like, oh, whatever. Let's do whatever it is next. And I was just probably crying and pretty upset. We live in the midst of acts of love. We live in the midst of conversations about divinity and God and source. And we tear each other up. And we rip apart the beauty in our world. And we pull at our togetherness until we destroy things. Rather than honoring the diversity of what brings us to love. The diversity of what brings us to light. Like, do I really care how you get to being a beautiful, loving human? Do I care what you believe if your belief helps you arrive there? That's why in Unity we say we honor all practices and the diversity of paths that lead to enlightenment. It's not just the diversity of paths. The diversity of paths that lead to enlightenment and awakening. But we sometimes get too stuck in letting our diversity not be a gift. Could we instead be in awe that the source living me, the source living you, the source living every aspect of what we call this life and this earth and all of it, has different ways of being known in each one of us. And that is mystical, and that is sacred, and that is more than enough. He talks about Catholicism and how a lot of people think of it as very rigid, right? Very rigid. It's this way. It's this belief. And he says, we have the Franciscan way of doing it, the Dominican way of doing it, the Benedictine way of doing it. We sometimes disagreed, but we were all still Catholic. There is room for immense diversity inside healthy Catholicism, more than most people realize. He goes on to say, we knew there wasn't only one way to look at or serve God. What we knew about God is important, but what we do with what we know about God is even more important. God is love. We are of this love. I have a million more things to share, but that's it. That's it. Namaste. Let's take a breath and breathe into our time of meditation, just inhaling and exhaling. Breathing into the words of that song by Steve Epley, When I Was God, this co-creative energy of life. Inhaling and exhaling in this sacred space. Allowing ourselves to surrender the rational mind, to honor it, but to remember that it serves the mystical mind. That it's here not to be a detriment to our spiritual practice, but to humble us, to soften us. Not so that we get so caught up in it, so separate, so arrogant, so naive to think that we're all that. But clear enough and wise enough to know, to point us to the Christ, to know that we can feel that co-creative ability, the power that we are, that as Jesus, the master teacher, lived and taught, ye are gods. You are the light of the world. Don't hide it. But also to become so empty, so humble, that we allow ourselves to be in awe, that we allow ourselves to be held, to recognize that we're in the river of life and we can be carried, and to allow that mystical mind, also known as the mind of Christ, the Christ consciousness, the enlightenment, to be our minds now. Inhaling and exhaling, we enter the sacrament of the present in the silence. Inhaling and exhaling. We feel our center, grounded, rooted, expansive. By the power of this practice, may all beings have freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings know they are born blessed and here to be a blessing. May all beings know God as love and themselves as emanations of that love. Namaste.